The day I flooded my front yard was the same day I became a neighborhood legend. If you're watching this from your phone while hiding from your own nightmare neighbor, hit subscribe now because this story might just give you the inspiration you need. I'm not saying you should copy what I did, but I'm not saying you shouldn't either. My name is Marcus Daniels, and until 6 months ago, I was just an ordinary guy trying to enjoy his early retirement in Suncrest Village, a golf cart community where most residents zip around in fancy customized carts rather than cars. I'd spent 25 years as a civil engineer specializing in water management systems. Ironic foreshadowing, as you'll soon discover, and had finally saved enough to buy my dream home with a perfect view of the community pond. Low-maintenance living in a friendly, mature community is what the brochure promised. What it failed to mention was Patricia Westmoreland, known not so affectionately throughout Suncrest as Golf Cart Patricia. I first met Patricia 3 days after moving in. I was unpacking boxes in my garage when I heard the distinctive electric hum of a golf cart, followed by the crunch of tires on my freshly laid sod. Looking up, I saw what can only be described as a golf cart on steroids, a massive, custom-painted purple monstrosity with chrome wheels, LED lighting strips, and a sound system that would make a nightclub jealous. Behind the wheel sat a woman in her early 60s, designer sunglasses perched on a face fixed in a permanent expression of disdain, her platinum blonde hair styled in what I'd later learn was her signature look, the "I need to speak to your community manager, Bob." "You're the new owner?" she called out without bothering to turn down Celine Dion blasting from her speakers. "Yes, Marcus Daniels," I replied, walking over with my hand extended. "Just moved in Monday." She ignored my outstretched hand, instead giving my property a slow, judgmental scan. "Well, Marcus, you should know that residents in Suncrest maintain certain standards. That garden hose should be on a reel, not just lying there, and those moving boxes need to be broken down immediately, not left visible from the street." I blinked, taken aback by this unsolicited criticism from a complete stranger. "I'm still unpacking. It's only been 3 days." "The community guidelines don't have a grace period," she stated flatly. "I'm Patricia Westmoreland, Neighborhood Watch Captain and member of the Architectural Control Committee." She handed me a glossy business card that, bafflingly, included her golf cart's make and model in the corner. "I'll take care of it soon," I assured her, eager to end this bizarre introduction. Patricia nodded curtly. "See that you do. By the way, I normally park my cart right here when I'm visiting Suzanne across the street." She gestured toward the corner of my front yard. It's been the arrangement for years. Before I could object, she executed a 3-point turn, driving directly over the edge of my newly installed lawn, and parked her oversized cart at Suzanne's house, leaving deep tire tracks across my grass. That was my introduction to Golf Cart Patricia, and little did I know it was just the beginning of what would become an increasingly absurd neighborhood feud. Over the next few weeks, I discovered that Patricia had been terrorizing Suncrest Village for nearly a decade. My next-door neighbor, Jim Rossi, a retired high school principal, filled me in over beers on his patio. "Patricia moved here when her husband died and left her with a ridiculous insurance payout," Jim explained. "She immediately joined every committee and started throwing her weight around. The previous owner of your house, poor Walter, eventually moved to assisted living, but she drove him crazy for years." "By parking on his lawn?" I asked. Jim nodded. "Among other things, she claimed there was a historical easement that gave her the right to park there when visiting Suzanne. Complete nonsense, legally speaking, but Walter was in his 80s and didn't want the conflict." "Well, I'm not in my 80s, I said, taking a long sip of my beer. Jim raised an eyebrow. "Be careful with Patricia. She's got friends on the HOA board and a vindictive streak wider than her golf cart." I should have heeded Jim's warning, but I've never been good at backing down when someone's clearly in the wrong. The next day, I installed small decorative rocks along the edge of my lawn, nothing that violated any HOA guidelines, just a subtle boundary marker. Patricia's response came within hours. I returned from a grocery run to find her purple monstrosity parked directly on my lawn, the decorative rocks apparently pushed aside. A note was taped to my door. Marcus, your unauthorized landscape modifications create a hazard for golf cart navigation. I've documented this violation and submitted it to the Architectural Control Committee. Patricia W. I took a deep breath and walked across the street to Suzanne's house, where Patricia was presumably visiting. Suzanne, a pleasant woman in her 70s, answered the door. Is Patricia here? I asked politely. Oh, she just left for her committee meeting, Suzanne replied apologetically. Is it about her parking on your lawn? I've told her for years she should ask permission. But it's fine, I interrupted, not wanting to put Suzanne in an uncomfortable position. I'll catch her later. Over the next 2 weeks, this bizarre territorial dance continued. I'd place the decorative rocks back. Patricia would move them. I installed small solar garden lights. Patricia submitted an HOA complaint claiming they weren't on the approved fixtures list. I finally put up a discreet "Please keep off grass" sign. Patricia's golf cart mysteriously ran it over the very next day. The breaking point came during a thunderstorm. I was working from home when I heard the familiar hum of Patricia's golf cart. Looking out the window through the rain, I watched in disbelief as she deliberately drove circles on my lawn, turning the already wet ground into a muddy, rutted mess before parking in her usual spot at Suzanne's house. That evening, as I assessed the damage to my once pristine lawn, something inside me snapped. I'm normally a reasonable person, but there's a limit to anyone's patience. I went inside and pulled out my old engineering textbooks and water management design manuals. You want to park on my property? I muttered to myself. Let's see how your precious golf cart handles a little water feature. The plan that formed wasn't just about revenge. It was about applying precise engineering principles to solve a problem, the problem being Patricia's entitlement. I would need to be careful, though. Any modifications to my property would need to comply with HOA regulations while simultaneously making it impossible for her to continue her territorial invasion. I spent the next week researching Suncrest's HOA bylaws and local ordinances. As it turned out, front yard water features were permitted as long as they were tasteful, maintained, and approved by the Architectural Control Committee. Patricia sat on that committee, but she wasn't the only member. My application to the ACC included detailed plans for what I described as a naturalistic rain garden to improve drainage and enhance property values. The design featured native plants, a recirculating pump system, and, most importantly, would occupy exactly the area where Patricia insisted on parking her golf cart. To my surprise, the committee approved my application 4-1. I later learned from Jim that Patricia had been so confident they would reject it that she hadn't bothered to review the plans carefully. The lone dissenting vote was, of course, hers. With approval secured, I hired a landscaping crew recommended by Jim, who happened to specialize in water features. The foreman, Dave, listened carefully as I explained exactly what I wanted. So basically, you want it to look solid enough to drive on, but actually be too soft to support anything heavier than a person walking, Dave clarified, a knowing gleam in his eye. Exactly, I confirmed, all while being completely up to code and visually appealing. Dave nodded slowly. I've worked in 5 different HOA communities, sir. I understand completely. The installation took 3 days. The result was beautiful, a seemingly solid garden area with stepping stones, native grasses, and subtle water circulation that wouldn't be obvious to a casual observer. The surface appeared to be stable mulch with decorative elements, but beneath was a carefully constructed bog garden with 6 inches of water underneath, a layer of specialized matting designed to support foot traffic but not vehicles. I added tasteful solar lighting and even a small bench near the edge, creating a charming spot that quickly earned compliments from passing neighbors. Several people stopped to tell me how much it improved the look of the street, all while I waited patiently for Patricia's next visit to Suzanne. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days after completion, I was pretending to read a book on my front porch when the familiar sound of Celine Dion announced Patricia's arrival. I watched over the top of my novel as she pulled up, surveyed my new landscaping with visible irritation, and then, just as I had anticipated, attempted to drive over it to reach her usual parking spot. What happened next was something I wish I'd had the foresight to record. The front wheels of her enormous custom golf cart broke through the specialized matting, instantly sinking into the concealed water garden. Patricia hit the accelerator in panic, causing the rear wheels to spin uselessly and sink deeper into my carefully engineered bog. "What have you done?" she shrieked, frantically trying to reverse as water began seeping into the lower section of her cart. I calmly put down my book and walked over. "I see you've discovered my new rain garden. The committee approved it last week. Beautiful, isn't it?" "This is deliberate sabotage." Patricia's face had turned the same shade of purple as her now sinking golf cart. "You've damaged my property." "This is deliberate sabotage." Patricia's face had turned the same shade of purple as her now sinking golf cart. "You've damaged my property." My water feature has become a neighborhood attraction, with people often stopping to admire the colorful koi fish I added last summer. I even installed a small bench beside it with a plaque that reads, "Dedicated to community boundaries and mutual respect." If there's a lesson in all this, it's that sometimes you need to fight fire with water, especially when dealing with someone who thinks the rules apply to everyone but themselves. Standing up to bullies doesn't always require confrontation. Sometimes it just requires creative problem solving and a solid understanding of local regulations. And if you're watching this video while dealing with your own neighborhood tyrant, remember, I'm not suggesting you turn your front yard into a booby trap. I'm just saying that knowing your rights, understanding the rules, and applying a little specialized knowledge can go a long way toward restoring balance to your community. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go tend to my water garden. The koi need feeding, and I've noticed Patricia eyeing the empty seat on the landscaping committee. A man's work is never done in Suncrest Village. 6 months after the Great Sinking, as residents now jokingly call it, life in Suncrest Village had transformed in ways I never expected. The incident with Patricia's golf cart had broken a dam of frustration among the residents, releasing years of pent-up resentment against her reign of petty tyranny. I was enjoying my morning coffee on the front porch when Jim walked over, newspaper tucked under his arm. "Morning Water Wizard," he called out, using the nickname that had somehow stuck despite my protests. "How many times do I need to ask people to stop calling me that?" I groaned, though secretly I didn't mind it that much. Jim chuckled as he took a seat beside me. "You'll never escape it now, especially after yesterday's board meeting." The previous evening, I had presented a proposal to install a small community rain garden and koi pond in the previously unused space near the clubhouse. The board had approved it unanimously, and several residents had already volunteered to help with maintenance. "Any sign of our favorite golf cart enthusiast?" Jim asked, nodding toward Suzanne's house. "Not since Tuesday," I replied, and she used the sidewalk, parked in Suzanne's driveway, and didn't make eye contact. Jim unfolded his newspaper with a satisfied nod. Progress. The truth was, I almost felt sorry for Patricia. Almost. Her social standing had collapsed overnight, and the committees she'd once ruled had quickly adapted to life without her input. Several of her essential rules had been quietly retired, including the ban on wind chimes and the restriction on garden gnomes, which had mysteriously proliferated throughout the community in recent months. As if summoned by our conversation, a small electric cart, not the gaudy purple monster of before, but a standard model in tasteful beige, appeared at the end of the street. Patricia sat behind the wheel, her once imperious posture now slightly hunched. She slowed as she approached my house, eyeing my water feature with what almost looked like grudging respect before continuing to Suzanne's, where she carefully parked in the driveway. "Well, I'll be damned," Jim muttered. "You can teach an old dog new tricks. Or at least teach them to stay off the lawn," I added. Later that afternoon, I was trimming some plants around my water feature when a shadow fell across the garden. Looking up, I found myself face to face with Patricia for the first time since the incident. "Your koi are new," she said stiffly, pointing to the colorful fish swimming in the clearer sections of the water garden. "Added them last month," I replied cautiously. "The ecosystem's stable enough now to support them." She nodded, her expression unreadable behind her designer sunglasses. For a moment, we stood in awkward silence. "The water circulation system," she finally said. "It's quite effective. No mosquito problems?" None, I confirmed, surprised by the civil conversation. The moving water prevents them from breeding, and the fish eat any larvae that might develop. Another nod, another silence. Then, to my astonishment, Patricia cleared her throat and said, "The garden design is well executed, particularly the plant selection." Coming from Patricia, this was practically a standing ovation. I managed to keep my jaw from dropping. "Thank you," I replied simply. She turned to leave, then paused. "I understand you're designing a similar installation for the clubhouse area." Word travels fast. "It's a small community," Patricia said with what might have been the ghost of a self-aware smile. Then, with visible effort, "If you need any input on plant selections that thrive in this climate, I maintained the botanical garden in Westford for 15 years before retiring." With that bombshell, she walked away, leaving me staring after her in disbelief. Jim was equally shocked when I recounted the conversation over beers that evening. Patricia Westmoreland offering help instead of criticism, check the sky for flying pigs. "Maybe near-death experiences for golf carts have a humanizing effect," I suggested. Jim snorted. "Or maybe she's just trying to work her way back into a position of influence. Don't trust her, Marcus." I wasn't sure what to think. On one hand, Patricia had made my first months in Suncrest miserable with her entitlement and hostility. On the other hand, I understood what it meant to be ostracized from a community. Having moved to Suncrest after my own painful divorce had left me feeling isolated in my former neighborhood. My opportunity to gauge Patricia's sincerity came sooner than expected. The following weekend, as volunteers gathered to break ground on the community water garden, Patricia appeared at the edge of the group, observing silently. After watching for nearly an hour, she approached me as I was marking out the pond boundaries. "Your drainage slope is insufficient," she said without preamble. "With the clay soil composition here, you'll get stagnation in that corner during heavy rains." I reassessed my measurements and realized she was right. "Good catch," I admitted. "What would you suggest?" Something flickered across her face, surprise perhaps at having her input accepted rather than rejected. She hesitated, then stepped forward and began pointing out adjustments to the design. By midday, Patricia was fully involved in the project, directing the placement of specific plants and demonstrating proper planting techniques to other volunteers. Her expertise was undeniable, and I noticed several residents who had previously given her the cold shoulder were now engaged in civil conversation with her. During a water break, Suzanne sidled up to me. "You know, before all this HOA business took over her life, Patricia was known statewide for her work with water-efficient gardens," she confided. "She won awards for it. Then her husband died, and she just changed. Needed to control everything." I watched Patricia carefully showing Mrs. Henderson how to position water lilies properly. There was a patience in her instruction that I wouldn't have believed possible a few months earlier. "Sometimes people just need to be valued for the right things," I mused. The community water garden project took 6 weekends to complete, with Patricia becoming increasingly central to its execution. Her knowledge of aquatic ecosystems was impressive, and the final result was far superior to what I had originally designed. The dedication ceremony, held on a perfect Sunday afternoon, drew nearly the entire community. Michael Santos, the community manager, handed me the ceremonial ribbon-cutting scissors with a smile. "Care to do the honors, Mr. Daniels?" I looked at the assembled crowd, then at Patricia standing quietly at the back. Making a split-second decision, I walked over and offered her the scissors. "This project wouldn't be half as good without your expertise," I said quietly. "You should do the honors." The shock on her face was quickly replaced by something I hadn't seen before, genuine emotion. She accepted the scissors with slightly trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered. As Patricia cut the ribbon to enthusiastic applause, I caught Jim's eye. He gave me a subtle nod of approval. The transformation in Suncrest Village continued over the following months, but perhaps the most remarkable change was in Patricia herself. Having found a productive outlet for her organizational energy and knowledge, she gradually shifted from community tyrant to valuable resource. She still preferred things to be done her way, but now she focused on education rather than enforcement. 1 year after my arrival in Suncrest, the community held its annual board election. To everyone's surprise, Patricia's name appeared on the ballot for Garden Committee Chair, a position created specifically to maintain the new water features and community plantings. Even more surprising was her campaign approach. No demands, no threats, just a simple list of qualifications and a promise to listen before acting. She won the position by a comfortable margin. The afternoon following the election, I found a small package on my doorstep with a card attached. Inside the box was a pair of specialized pruning shears for aquatic plants. The card read simply, "To the man who taught me that sometimes you have to sink before you can swim. Thank you for the second chance, Patricia." Later that week, as I used the new shears to maintain my water garden, still affectionately known throughout the community as Patricia's Pond, I reflected on the strange journey of the past year. What had begun as a territorial dispute had evolved into a community transformation and eventually an unlikely redemption story. Patricia's purple golf cart monstrosity was long gone, replaced by her sensible beige model that never ventured onto anyone's lawn. My water garden had flourished into a neighborhood talking point that regularly attracted compliments from visitors to Suncrest, and the community itself had found a new balance, less rigid, more collaborative, and infinitely more pleasant to live in. As if on cue, Patricia's cart appeared at the end of the street, now equipped with a small trailer containing gardening supplies. She waved briefly as she passed my house and parked properly in Suzanne's driveway. No Celine Dion blasting, no imperious attitude, just a neighbor going about her business. I waved back, smiling despite myself. Sometimes victory isn't about defeating your enemy. Sometimes it's about creating a world where they're no longer your enemy at all. And if you're watching this while dealing with your own neighborhood conflict, remember, water finds its level eventually. Your challenge is deciding whether you want to use it to sink someone's golf cart or to grow something beautiful together. Both approaches worked for me, but I know which one I'm prouder of in the end.